Wow, what an incredible story. And I'm a little distracted because Dana's here with the baby. And Dana and Anthony's baby is right back there. But what an incredible story. And all morning I've just been thinking, because if you haven't been with us, we're in this conversation called A New Home, and we've been looking at how Jesus changes everything in terms of the relationship that we get to have with the Father. That God's not interested in just living in a temple and you got to go to see and or go to experience him, but that he gives his life for us to have this phenomenal relationship with God as our Father, and this closeness, this intimacy that we get to have with him. And then you hear her in that story talking about moving through this and experiencing it with him. And I hear stories like that and I think, man, what would it be like to go through something like that without him? I just can't fathom what that would be like to go through something like that without him. And all morning, it's just made me more and more grateful that we don't have to experience that, but that because of what Jesus has done, and specifically what we've been talking about inside of this story that we've been sitting in for the last 5 weeks, we get to experience that with him. We know he's always with us, and that he's experiencing that with us as our dad, and that we get to experience him in that way. Again, if you haven't been with us, we've been really sitting down into this one story where Jesus is sharing with his followers something that he's about to make possible. I've said it again, I'll say it again. It wasn't possible when he actually shared the story. It wasn't going to be possible until he actually gives his life and comes back from the dead, making it possible for us to be able to be adopted into God's family, for us to be welcomed home, not just by God, but by our Father. And today, I want to go back to that story. And I know some of you are thinking, how many weeks can you spend in one story? But I hope that you've seen, as we've moved through this, that it is far more profound than maybe we thought. And that every piece of this story, Jesus is using to help us understand the heart of God better. And I hope as we've moved through this, that for some of you, because on week one, remember, some of you, I said, I'm not asking you to trust me today that God loves you this way, but I want for you to journey with us. And I hope that as you've journeyed with us, that you've made the decision to trust that he actually does love you that way. And I hope for others of you, it's increased your understanding of the relationship that you get to have with him. But the story is not over. And to recap, I'm just going to walk you through the story and we'll look back at what we've seen. It says, Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. And we started off in week 1 and we talked about the reality that all of us in life have come to God and say, listen, I want what you can give. I just don't want you. And so Jesus starts the story with something that really is true about each and every one of us. He says, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out as a citizen of that country, or out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. And so he demands his inheritance, and then he goes and he blows the entire thing. And again, Jesus is calling us to a reality in our own lives that when we use what God has given us and we use it to pursue the things of the world, it doesn't leave us wealthy. It leaves us poor. And while we may still physically be wealthy, the reality is that our souls are starving. And again, you see him. Well, he's not in this story just helping us to understand the Father's heart better. He's helping us to understand our story better. And he's helping us to understand our heart as well, and specifically those things that would keep us from home. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. And we talked about the posture of a prodigal, that if we're going to come home, there's a posture to it, that we don't come home entitled or proud, but that we come home as servants. I'm yours. So he got up and went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. And you see this homecoming moment, and the father comes out. It says, the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And we talked last week about how he gives his son phenomenal value. This son who had destroyed all of his value now is restored. And this incredible value that you've been given that will never change because of what's been paid for you. I hope you've moved through this past week celebrating that. The incredible value that has been given to you, not earned, not rightfully ours, and yet it has been given to you because of what was paid for you. But the story isn't done. The father welcomes him home. It restores him as a son. And then it says this. It says, bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. So not only does he walk out and wrap his arms around his son, not only does he restore him as a son, but then he says, it's time to party. He says, okay, listen, we're going to celebrate, and we're not going to celebrate small. We're going to celebrate really, really, really big. As a matter of fact, as we continue in the story, you're going to find out that you could hear the party from the fields surrounding the house. This was not a small deal. We're going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate big. And this is significant for several reasons. Remember, as we've been walking through this, I told you that Jesus shares 3 stories. And the stories aren't all the same. The first 2 are very close to one another, and then the third one is quite different. But there is one thing that's consistent through all 3 stories, and that is the party. All 3 stories have the party, and they celebrate. Now, this is significant because hopefully you understand this about life. What you celebrate is what you value. So, if you want to tell what is important to someone, look at what they celebrate. Look at what it is that they get most excited about. And you can uncover your values pretty easy if you just look closely at what it is that makes you most angry, and if you look closely at what it is that makes you most happy. And that will let you know this is what you value. This is what's significant to you. And Jesus, as he's telling these stories, he's trying to help them understand the Father. And he says, I want you to understand what it is that he celebrates. What is it that he values? Well, he celebrates the loss that is found. He celebrates when someone comes home. For those of you who have come home, did you know that there was a party? That there was a celebration? For those of you who have not yet come home, do you know that there's a party waiting to happen? This is what he values. This is what he throws parties for. Those who come home. He's, again, revealing to us the heart of the Father, what it is that he values. But it also begs the question of us. What is it that you celebrate? What is it that you get most excited about? I remember years ago I had a conversation with someone, and it crushed me. We were debating some NFL question, which player was better than another, and we're going back and forth. And I love to argue. It's one of my favorite pastimes. It's one of my wife's least favorite things about me, but I love it. And we were in the midst of this, and we we're going back and forth, and it was a meaningless conversation. And the individual looked across the table at me in the midst of it, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, you're this passionate about everything." And he meant it just as a side comment, but it crushed me. Because I never want to be as passionate about anything as I am about Jesus. I never want to speak as passionately about anything as I do about Jesus. And some of, it's interesting, some of you come here and you know that I cry almost every week when I speak, and you think, that guy's a disaster. He must cry all the time. It must just nonstop crying. And believe it or not, I don't cry very often when I'm not on the stage, but part of that is I don't ever want to be as passionate about anything as I am about Jesus. What do you celebrate? What is it that you're most passionate about, if you're really honest with yourself? Maybe the answer is encouraging to you. Maybe it's challenging to you. Maybe some of you are sitting there thinking, well, what I celebrate most is Penn State, which will last for about a few more weeks. What is it that you celebrate? Jesus says, this is the heart of your Father. He celebrates you. He celebrates when you come home. It shows us what it is that he values. Again, it shows us how he loves, how he so amazingly loves us. But there's another thing that this moment should do as we encounter it in our lives. As you read through this story and as you see the celebration, this should impact the way you view God or the way you see God. So let me ask you this question. What does God look like to you? All of us have a mental image of God. When you think about God, and maybe you, even when you're praying, you're thinking about, you have a mental image, and maybe you've put time into it, maybe you haven't put time into it, but you have one, and it's impacted by all sorts of things, maybe conversations, messages like this that you've heard, or most likely impacted by cartoons that you've watched. And so in the cartoon, God was kind of this shiny, almost star-like thing, and so you see him that way, or maybe God is really, really old with a really long beard, and that's how you see him, and all white hair. I don't know what it is for you, but all of us have one. So let me ask you this. What's your image? What does God look like? It's years ago when I was planting a church with my dad, there was a really interesting conversation that took place in the Sunday school class because the teacher asked the class this. They said, she said, do you know what God looks like? And she was trying to help them understand that you don't necessarily know what God looks like, but there was one child who was adamant that he knew exactly what God looks like. And they were kind of going back and forth, and he's like, no, I know exactly what God looks like. And she said, well, can you draw it? Can you draw it for me? And he said, no, I don't need to draw it for you. I can show you. She said, what do you mean you can show me? He said, I know what God looks like. She said, what does God look like? He said, God looks like this. because it's the only thing he'd ever seen. Our image is shaped by a lot of different things, but if you don't pay attention to it, it will actually impact your experience of God. So let me ask you this question. What is your image? And then in addition to that, maybe more importantly, let me ask you this question. What is the expression on his face? As I've worked through this with people over the years, I've discovered that for most of us, God's angry. The expression on his face is anger. Now you may say, well, he's not angry, he's just serious. Or maybe you think God has a resting face like mine, and it always looks angry. I have these 2 wrinkles in my forehead. I can't get rid of them, and people always think I'm angry. What's wrong, Chris? Nothing's wrong. I'm fine. I'm happy. I just don't look like it. Maybe you think, maybe that's how you see God. But then you come, Jesus is trying to help us understand the Father. Let me ask you this. What's the expression on the Father's face? What's the expression on the Father's face? Well, he's excited. And this isn't a picture of someone who is holding back on their emotions. He runs out. He wraps his arms around him. You see him literally demonstrating joy. What's the expression on the Father's face? Maybe you've always seen God as serious, or maybe you see him as someone who, well, he just keeps his emotions in check. Maybe, I'm like that as well. It's fun. It's interesting. Sometimes we'll be in staff meeting and someone will do something funny and I'll say, that's funny. And Anthony always reminds me, he says, normal people, when something funny happens, they laugh. They don't say, that's funny. But this picture that we see of God is one of joy. This should impact the way that you see God. For some of you who are thinking about coming home, what do you think you're going to come home to? What's the expression that you expect? It should change our image of God. And make no mistake about it, your image of God, the way that you see him, will impact how you experience him, and it will definitely impact how often you seek to experience him. It's significant. And Jesus, as he's trying to help us understand the Father, tells us this story. And in all 3 stories, there's a party. All 3 stories, there's joy. There's no way you can picture in any of the stories anything other than a smile. And not even a small one, a significant smile. It should impact the way that we see God. But Jesus still isn't done with the story, and so he continues. He says, meanwhile, the older son, you say, oh, we finally get to the other brother. Some of you are wondering if he was even going to be part of the story. It says, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard the music and dancing. And again, this is, as we're talking about this, understand, this is a real party. This is not a dinner party. Okay? This is a real party. It's big. It's loud. This is one of the reasons why, this is actually one of the reasons why we celebrate baptism the way that we do. And sometimes we'll go into baptism and I'll say, some of you are used to like the golf clap thing. We believe in loud and we believe in big, and it has everything to do with what you see in this passage. It has to do with these 3 stories and the reality that God says, no, when someone comes back to me, I throw a party. And so when we walk through that step of baptism and someone says, I've come home, we want to celebrate with him. We want to join into that party. And years ago, when we were first starting Hope and Grace, we actually had a baptism, and a staff member and I were walking out of the service, and I looked at him and I said, that was one of the most boring things I've ever been part of. and we thought about what we had just experienced, and we thought about the reality of this passage, and we said, we have to do something different. And so we decided, no, when we go into baptisms, we're going to celebrate, and we're going to celebrate big. And there's going to be certain celebration that we only do with baptism because of the fact that this is what we value. And this is the heart of our dad. And so it says the older son hears the party. So he calls one of the servants and asked him, what is going on? Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So the brother comes, he hears the party, he calls the servant, hey, what in the world is happening? He says, your brother's home. And so your dad decided to throw a party. And the older brother is furious. Now, let me ask you this really quickly before you have time to think about it. When you hear that the older brother is furious, what's your initial thought? Initially, it goes one of two ways, right? Initially, some of you heard that the older brother was angry and you thought, what's wrong with him? Why wouldn't you be happy? Others of you heard that the older brother was angry and you thought, well, of course he is. He has the right to be. I would be angry too. It's interesting, our initial reaction, well, it reveals something inside of us. And the brother's furious. So the father went out and pleaded with him. Now, note this. Pay very close attention to this. It says, so the father went out and pleaded with him. Both brothers, the father goes out to meet them. Just in case you think that you're the one who's pursuing him. Jesus, even as he's telling this story, is like, no. God's coming to you. God's the one and he comes to both of them. This is a mistake that a lot of people make when it comes to the Pharisees, because when he comes to the older brother, he's talking about the Pharisees. They're the ones, I have it all together. I did it the right way. Why is it? And one of the mistakes that people make when they watch Jesus interact with the Pharisees, because sometimes he's pretty intense with them, is that they can look at that, or they talk about it like Jesus loved one group of people and didn't love the other. Listen to me, that's not true at all. Jesus was pursuing the Pharisees as much as he was pursuing anyone else that he encounters. He just knew what it is that they needed to hear in order for them to come home. And in both situations, you see the Father's heart. He's pursuing them. And this is one of the most amazing things about God. This is why we can say week after week, it doesn't matter who you are, where you've been, or what you've done. Why? Because God is pursuing. God pursues us not based on who we are, but based on who he is and the way he loves. And so you see him, the Father goes out from the party and pleads with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. It's an interesting statement, never disobeyed your orders. It's interesting how once we go down the self-righteousness path, we begin to believe interesting things about ourselves. And never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him. And the older brother says, no, wait. No, I did it right. I did it right. I'm not the one who blew it. I'm not the one who squandered it all. I'm the one who did it right. And then he says this, and I never even got a goat. Some of you are like, do you want a goat? Is that a thing? I don't. And then listen very carefully to the father's response, because the father's response is where you see the most significant thing as it pertains to the older brother. My son, the father said, you are always with me. It's an interesting response. You are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. He responds, you are always with me. Why does he say that? When you get to the older brother, you see the perfect picture of religion. And make no mistake about it, listen to me very carefully. Jesus did not come to start a religion. Jesus wasn't interested in religion at all. Religion is, okay, how do I earn my way back to God? How do I earn favor with God? How do I in some way get God to respond positively to me by what it is that I do? Jesus wanted nothing to do with religion. Jesus doesn't come and show you how you can earn your way back. Jesus comes and earns your way back and then invites you into a relationship in which he gives that to you in his grace and mercy. It's not a religion. It's all relationship. But when you look at the older brother, you see the perfect picture of religion because he says, wait, no, I did it right. I earned it. But pay attention to this. Listen, what is it that he wants? Well, I want what the Father can give. And I did it the right way. I earned what you can give. Don't miss this. Both sons wanted the same thing. They wanted what the Father can give. They just wanted it without the Father. The older son is no different than the younger son. That's why the Father says, you've always been with me. But wait a second. At no point did I keep from you that which was most valuable. And what is it that the older son is saying? Yeah, but I don't want you. I want that. And I've earned it. And both sons miss what was most valuable. The Father. Both of them miss what was most valuable. But I've been with you the whole time. Yeah, but Dad, I don't want you. I want that. And that's what religion is. Religion is, I want that. And so I'm going to do the right things so that God will give me that. Whatever it is, success, health. And if I do the right, and some of you are here today because of this. You think if I show up here enough times and if I serve and if I do this, well, then nothing will ever, then life's going to work out and it's going to be okay. And I'm not going to actually encounter difficult things or painful things. Listen to me, that's not the promise of Jesus. Jesus doesn't say, when you step into this relationship with me, I'm going to take you out of the brokenness of the world. That's not what he says. As a matter of fact, he says, when you step into this relationship with me, I'm going to send you back into the brokenness of the world to help other people find their way home. But in all of it, you will always have the Father. But in all of it, I will always be with you. To which many of us, if we're honest, think, yeah, but I don't want that. I want for life to work out. My promise is that I will walk through all of it. There will not be anything, not a moment where I will not be with you, where you cannot know and experience my value and belonging and love. Yeah, okay, God, but that's not what I want. What I want is for my kids to not get sick. What I want is for my job to work out. What I want is to not get thyroid cancer. And the story works out one of two ways, the older son or the younger son. The younger son says, well, I'm going to try to make life work out by going my own way and doing my own thing and pursuing what the world says is going to bring me life and is going to bring me joy. And so we run from God. We rebel against God. We want nothing to do with God. Or the other way is, no, I'm going to do the right things so that I can get God to give me what I want. But in both situations, you miss what is most valuable, which is the Father. Where is life found? Where is life found? Where is the cravings of your heart found? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. Where is it found? If you think it's found in life working out, you're either going to try to find it in the things of this world or you're going to try to manipulate God into it. And in either situation, you're not going to actually know home because you won't value the Father. And Jesus is saying, no. Life is found in your dad. And I'm going to give my life to make sure that you can experience what the Father says. You are always with me. Home is not just found, but it's experienced when we come to the Father and say, when we do the opposite of what we see the sons do, when we come to the Father and say, I don't want that. I want you. And whether I get that or not, it's not what I want. I want you, because life is found in you. As we've walked through this and we've seen, okay, the reality that we can come home, but also the reality of what it means to know home. Let me ask you this question. What's your next step? If that's true, if what Jesus has taught us is true, that God looks at you this way, loves you this way, values you this way, invites you home this way, what's your next step? For some of you, it's coming home for the first time. For some of you, it's rejecting the religion that you've bought into and realizing, wait, I'm just trying to manipulate God here. I don't actually have a relationship with him, and you need to reject that and say, no, I'm done with that. What I want is you. I want to be adopted as your child. I want to belong to you. For others of you, maybe you're in this, but you've let religion creep in there. Or maybe you've let these other things that tell you that this is where life is found to creep in, and you're not valuing the Father the way that you know that you can. In the way that Jesus is calling us to. What is your next step? One of the reasons why we have Rhythms, which is inside of your app, one of the reasons why we have Rhythms here at Hoboken Grace is so that we live in a constant awareness of the home we have. Home is not something you have to find. We talked at the beginning about longing for belonging and love and value. You don't have to find it. It's available to you. It can never be taken from you if you will accept what Jesus has made possible. You have never experienced or even dreamt of the value that he's made possible. We can't even imagine the degree to which he has made us a part of his, that we belong. And you've never been loved. You've never been loved like this. It's home. He is home. What's your next step? How can you not just come home, but how can you know home? Every day, every week, every month, every year, as you move forward. Will you pray with me? Father, I pray that today you would allow us to be able to see what is it that, to see maybe where the older brother or the younger brother is showing up in our lives, to see what it is that you're calling us to do. Father, I pray that this truly, it wouldn't just be a moment in our lives. I pray that this wouldn't be a temporary experience, but that we would live in the ongoing reality of home, the ongoing reality of our Father, the way that you have loved us, the way that you valued us, the way in which we belong in your family. In Jesus' name.